Hey, Sami here. I'm not your typical job counselor. I work remote and I travel the world as I kickstart careers. This is raw, real, and on the road.
Hi, Sami here, and welcome to the Career Kickstart Show. I am super excited because I have Ruth Humphreys, who is a storyteller. She's a coach. She has had quite the career journey going from librarian to storyteller, and I am super excited to have her on the show because she's going to give us some information on not just how you make such a pivot from librarian to storyteller, but also how you can utilize the power of your inner child to make your own career evolution. Ruth, you can give a better introduction, so would you mind just giving us your elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure, Sami. Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, so my name is Ruth Humphreys. Yes, so I am a storyteller. I also help work with people to help them reconnect with their inner child, their playful inner child, so to speak. But yes, originally a librarian. That was my original training. And I was the kind of kid or teenager who would go to the library and when I was a little bit older start going in and asking if any books need to be shelved, and I used to go in, week out, and then one day I found myself on the rota so like actually on the timetable, and it just kind of went on from there, and then I did actually get a qualification in librarianship. When there were many cutbacks, as there are in libraries and many other council and government organisations. Oh, I should mention I'm in the UK. That's probably quite important. And yeah, when I went through various cutbacks and then was made redundant, and when I worked in libraries, my focus was on children, families, young people, and particularly very littlies as well. And so when I left the library, I really wanted to continue working with children and storytelling, because when you work in libraries, storytelling is kind of part and parcel of everything, really. So I started my own business, which is Magic Carpet Storytelling. And I think for many of us, when we do start our own business, we also continue doing other work alongside it. And I mention that because I find a lot of people don't talk about that actually. So over the years, while I've been working on my storytelling business and also the helping people reconnect with their inner child, I've also done various different jobs, including being an editor, admin assistant, and yeah, everything you can imagine, really. So currently, I'm also an editor, an admin assistant, and also storyteller, and help people reconnect with their inner child. So got many different hats.
How do you find that having so many hats, how has that helped you be able to work with people as a inner child coach? I imagine that being able to bring all those skill sets can be so valuable to your clients as well.
Yeah, I absolutely think it is. I mean, initially working in libraries, you work with people from all walks of life. I mean, libraries are the sort of centre of the community, and hopefully still are. And so, seeing people from all different backgrounds and communities, and then continuing to do that in all my other roles, as including being an editor of a magazine, and also admin for some spiritual community and also a church, means that I have seen lots of different type of roles and people from different backgrounds. Now, in regards to the inner child, the inner child for me is all about the playfulness of the inner child. And so finding that play wherever you are, reconnecting back with what you loved as a child, and I'll perhaps go into that a little bit in a while, and finding that play even in perhaps the most difficult of circumstances. So it's connecting back with the essence, and as I say, working with people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, has sort of aided that in that, really.
Okay. And, when you talk about doing your inner child work and, having to like navigate these different positions, how, this is kind of a two-part question. Could you explain, kind of what kind of the inner child 101, kind of go into a little bit of that. And then could you kind of explain how people can utilize their own inner child to be able to navigate and, kind of beat career stagnation or help them find, a new path?
Yes, of course. Okay, so inner child 101. There is various different aspects of the inner child. And I think the aspect which is perhaps most well known, certainly maybe self-development circles, is the sort of hurt inner child. So reconnecting back with that inner child. But the inner child I actually work with myself, because I just to kind of clarify, I'm not a counsellor or in that way trained. I am a storyteller and I'm an artist, and what I like to connect with is the playful inner child. So for me, the inner child is about reconnecting with that sense of wonder we have in the world when we're a child, that sense of play, and how when we're a child everything is play, even when it shouldn't be. I mean, if you watch children going like to the market or shops or in the supermarket, they want to play in everything. And for your listeners, but I'm sure all of us can remember times when, all those times we played as children. And so for me, and for this work, I emphasize the idea of the playful inner child and being able to reconnect with that and reconnect back with the essence of it. So not becoming a child again ourselves, but looking for the essence within that. I mean, to give you a little bit of an example, because I know this is, it can be a little difficult to explain on its own. For me, one of the things I loved as a child was to draw. And when I was reconnecting back with my inner child, I started drawing again. But of course, as a child, it would have been with crayons. Now, as an adult, I'm still taking that idea, but taking it to oil paints and sculpture and other ways of creating art. So it's kind of finding the essence of the playful inner child and bringing that into your adult life.
Okay, and that must be really important for people who are artists or creatives or just trying to tap into that creativity, is to utilize those different tools. I could see that being applied to a lot of different fields, from designers to web developers.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's actually also a wonderful tool even for people who may not consider themselves traditionally creative. This idea of, the question I always ask is, what was it you loved to do as a child? How did you love to play as a child? And the exercise I always give people is to start by just brainstorming that, journaling it, and just getting down some ideas, and some ideas of where you were as well. any sort of memories around those things, because they're not always going to be just creative things. Some of us as children love to play sports, or perhaps was absolutely fascinated by science. A good example of this is in the UK at the moment, and I don't know if you can get it on TV in the States, but I really hope it comes to you, is a program all about astronauts. I don't know if you've come across it at all, but
Nope.
it's basically like a group of people who are training to be astronauts, and they are, it's set up a little bit like The Apprentice or something like that, so almost like a reality show. But they are training in order to be picked to be referred or get a reference to work with NASA or the space program. And the reason I mention this is because pretty much every one of the candidates in this talk about how they have wanted to go to space since they were a child, and they show like pictures of them, I don't know, like maybe at the Space Exploration Museum, or with pictures on their bedroom walls, and there's that kind of passion. Now, I know this sounds like a bit of a strange story to say, but it's that idea of we all have that thing which we are absolutely passionate about as a child, but often it's kind of it's either been forgotten, or maybe even said by somebody well meaning or not, that it's not possible. And so, although I'm talking about, creative passions, it could be something else. And in regards to your listeners, as we're, say you're looking for a new career path or reinventing yourself, there's so much gold in going back to your childhood dreams and just beginning to re-examine them. And I'm not saying we're all going to be astronauts, but some of us have got to be.
I agree. I mean, I feel like there should be more astronauts. And I like how you're going through about how you can reconnect to those different passions, because yes, there's some things we grow out of, but some things we don't. We just kind of like push back, and I think that is really valuable for people who are kind of lost at, what to do next. Is to really think about, okay, what passions did I have?
Absolutely. And it's finding the essence of it as well. And it may not always be so clear what that essence is, but it may be becoming an astronaut. And this program has just made me really laugh, because when I was first talking to people about childhood dreams, they would say, the kind of rebuttals I would get was, well, what if I want to be an astronaut? And I'd be like, well, yeah, okay. But, you've got these people, somebody's got to do it. Somebody has got to be the film directors, or all those different roles, which when you go to your careers guidance teacher as a kid, as a student, I don't know about you, but there's certain things you're just told, no, you can't do, or people trying to kind of soften the blow before there's even any chance of exploring it. So it really is reconnecting back with some of those things, and just seeing, and also seeing if they're still true for you, because sometimes they may not be, but there might still be some spark connected to it. So it's really starting the conversation. That's what it's about, really.
What I like about talking about the conversation, also the fact that a lot of people get warned away from things, by people who are well-meaning, but their warnings are often fueled by, you could almost call it lost or frustrated dreams themselves. And we can have that from our nearest and dearest. When you are kind of talking with people about their inner child work, how to maybe navigate a next chapter in their life, how do you help them overcome those sort of naysayers who may be well-meaning but are really advocating for them to kind of drop the dream or what have you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think to begin with, it really starts with inner work, because we do internalize these voices as well. So, or especially, I found clients who do that because we're told, for example, maybe go to choir as a child and told, oh, you can't sing. And so you don't sing for 20 years. And so, but in the current reality, I suppose, you're saying about sort of like your nearest and dearest or the people who are actually in your life at the moment, sometimes it is really a case of kind of getting confident yourself first. And it may be a case, everybody's circumstance is going to be different, but it may be a case of not speaking too much about it, at least while you're still kind of dipping your toe back into the water of that kind of thing. It can be just taking it very one small step at a time. And again, it very much depends on the personality. Some of us will be able to just go, oh, well, I'm going to do it whatever. And that's the end of the day. But the people I tend to work with tend to have maybe find that more tricky, and maybe find conflict more tricky. So I think it really is becoming kind of certain yourself first, and really reconnecting back with your love of that activity, of that way of playing. Because when you can really reconnect back with that love of it and that sparkle, I think things just come. So it is really a case of kind of working with people individually to see what the circumstances are, I think. I think that's probably the key thing. And just say, that dream is there for a reason. And we do get things in the way. But kind of doing the inner work first. That would be where I would go with that.
And I think you made a good point about, there's some things that you're not always going to share with people. Not everybody is allowed in the pillow fort, especially when it comes to, dreams that are they're still fragile. It's why, when we're creating a garden, we have our seedlings separated because they're not ready yet. A fully grown tree can withstand a storm, but the sapling might not. So I think that's a really good point about, do your inner work, and kind of give yourself the space to nurture these dreams before you take them, out into the spotlight.
Absolutely.
It sounds like when you're talking about inner work and kind of harnessing your creativity, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're thinking about a lot of journaling, a lot of maybe pursuing some sort of art. What is also another method for inner work for people who maybe are new to the concept?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good way of starting inner work is all the sort of things you've already mentioned. So journaling, drawing, and I think they're probably the most, I was going to say the most gentle, because in a way they are, because they involve a pen and a paper, but actually they can be incredibly deep. But getting things down on paper, getting marks down on the page, I think that's where I always talk about. I always say, if you can't write, draw. And when I say draw, just get color down on the page, and don't worry about it being art per se. This is a process. It's not anything else really. There are so many different ways of doing inner work, and it can get rather over the top sometimes. And the other thing is asking for help. So if you are starting with something, especially around the inner child, I mean, in the early days and actually still, going to a counsellor. So, if you feel like there's something you need to work on alongside your own work, then absolutely ask for help. This is not about just having self-help. It's about, your circumstances better than anybody else. So that's another thing just to mention alongside that. I don't know if that's too heavy, but I think it's important in this time and place. Really.
Yeah, I agree. When you are starting inner work, one thing that that is important, and I feel like for most people, I think pretty much everybody on the planet could do quite well with having at least a couple of sessions of talk therapy with a qualified counselor or a psychologist or something like that, so it's not too heavy, especially when you talk about this sort of work. For you, what do you think would be for the inner child work and thinking about careers, what is a quick exercise that you have your clients do?
Yeah, certainly. So my main quick one is actually the one I've talked about, which is just asking that simple question of what did you love to do as a child, and journaling it. I also talk about getting ask my clients to interview their inner child, and there is more details of that on my website, which I can mention at the end. But that is asking questions of your inner child, that aspect of yourself, in a very, very playful manner, and things like what do you want to do when you grow up? That's my favorite one, and not just expecting one answer, and just seeing what comes. So the easy way to do that, in fact, is for your listeners at the moment, is to settle in somewhere quiet, connecting with just your normal meditation method if you use one, or if you don't, just settle in quietly, feel your feet on the floor and ground yourself, and just take some deep breaths. And then when you feel completely ready, just asking those two simple questions. The first, what did I love to do as a child? And just seeing what comes up with your eyes closed. And the second, what would I like to do when I grow up? And just seeing what comes up, and just being really open, even if you're really surprised. The other thing I also ask with that is, what are you curious about? What were you curious about as a child? And journal it. What are you curious about now? And journal it. And have a look and see if any of those two things match. And again, don't judge it. And then look at those and take one thing as a child you were curious about, and one thing you are curious now as an adult, and just do a little bit of research, or just do one thing towards finding out about that thing. And it's just these tiny little steps, almost like breadcrumbs through the forest, and just see what comes from it, and just be completely open-minded and take it from there. That would be my exercise.
I love that, Ruth. Thank you so much. I think that is a good closing exercise for this interview. But before we go, I really would love for you to share exactly how listeners can find you, your website, and what you're up to next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my website is ruthhumphreys.com. So it's Ruth Humphreys, and Humphreys is HUMPHREYS. And if you think of it like Humphrey the name, and then S at the end, hopefully you'll get it. So that's ruthhumphreys.com. I am also on Facebook as Ruth Humphreys as well. I'm on Twitter as Ruth Jasmine. Bit of a long story there. I won't go into that at the moment. And that's probably the best ways to get hold of me. I'm mainly on Facebook, as I think many of us are. Oh, and also Instagram as well. You can find the links from my website. In regards to what I'm up to, my Wonder Shops, which is reconnecting with your inner child and creativity and sort of tips around that. And there's also my series of Live Your Childhood Dream videos, which are interviews with all sorts of different people who are actually living their childhood dreams in various different ways and how they've done that, as well as having good conversations around self-development, spirituality, creativity, storytelling, and everything else we need to be talking about at the moment. Drop me a line. I'd love to have a chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ruth. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and all the listeners, remember, check Ruth out on both her website and Facebook. So thank you again.
Oh, it's delightful. Thank you, Sami. It's wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. As always, I'm Sami, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. Bye.
Find something cool at cool.careerkickstartacademy.com.